Well, good day, folks. I'm joining you again for another episode of the Secret Solve by the producer here, who is going through the secret book and looking at the various and sundry entries. Tonight, I'm talking about the sophomore Jinx. Graduamus ignorus. Graduus ignorus, as in we're not going to graduate. So today I'll be talking about page 96 and page 97 in the book The Secret by Byron Priest. And this one's this was pretty simple. This is Chicago for the most part. It's Chicago, Chicago, Chicago. Now, if you're not smart enough, honestly, I don't know how it took those guys so long in Chicago to figure out there was one in Chicago because it starts out from the tables down at Maury's. Well, Maury's is a Chicago delicatessen, well-known place in Chicago. It's where you get Maury's famous Chicago's best deli and corned beef sandwich. Maury's, Chicago. Well, how do we know that's really who they're talking about? Chicago. Well, because a frat row game of Dungeons and Dragons is today's variation of goldfish swallowing parties. Oh, Dungeons and Dragons. Well, I wonder who invented Dungeons and Dragons and where the guy hails from that invented Dungeons and Dragons. Well, Ernest Gary Gygax was born in 1938, and he's an American game designer, best known for co-creating and pioneering role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons with Dave Amoson. In the 60s, Gygax created an organization of clubs, and Gygax was born in Chicago, the son of Almina Emil Posey's Burdick and Swiss immigrant and former Chicago Symphony Orchestra violinist Ernie Gygax. He was named Ernest after his father, but was commonly known as Gary, the middle name given to him by his mother after the actor Gary Cooper. The family lived on Kenmore Avenue. Remember, we've talked about appliances and all kinds of other fun stuff that has to do with appliances, and Kenmore was a brand that you could buy at Sears, and he was close enough to Wrigley Field that he could hear the roar of the crowds watching the Chicago Cubs play baseball. So he became a member of a group of kids that called themselves the Kenmore Pirates. I guess that's because they all lived on that street. His father decided to move the family to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and that's where they still live. So there you go. A little history of your board game, Dungeons and Dragons, having a nice little bit of connection to Chicago. Yeah. And so let's see. All right. So that's that guy. Oh, so the next guy that's mentioned is Louis Belushi. John Belushi. Oh my God! I wonder where John Belushi hails from. I mean, this puzzle is so hard to figure out in Chicago. John Adam Belushi was born Agnes Dmitri Belushi and Adam Anastas Belushi in Humboldt Park, a neighborhood on the west side of Chicago. Agnes, a pharmacy worker, was born in Ohio to Albanian immigrants, and Adam was an Albanian immigrant from Kazee, who owned the Fair Oaks restaurant on the North Avenue, or on North Avenue in Chicago, and later established a restaurant in the Chicago suburb of Wheaton, Illinois. So good old John Belushi. John Belushi. Imagine that, another Chicago native and a puzzle about Chicago? Oh, I see now how this maybe kind of works. Okay, we were talking about F. Scott Fitzgerald. F. Scott Fitzgerald. Well, maybe the puzzle's not only about Chicago, because we're talking about F. Scott Fitzgerald. And old F. Scott Fitzgerald, he was born in St. Paul, Minnesota. Oh, hold on. didn't I have another relationship to the Minneapolis St. Paul area of a company that was from that area? Oh yeah, that's right. I did have another reference to that. Um, F. Scott Fitzgerald died at the age of 44, so he was probably kind of a sophomore. I mean, he hadn't really reached full age, and he died in let's see, I think it's Los Angeles, California. Yeah, that's Scott Fitzgerald. You know, he died in L.A. He wrote the book Great Gatsby. His wife had schizophrenia. He was pretty young when he died. There's a shooting, suicide in the, I think in the Gatsby book, and he served in the army with Zelda Sayer, which is something. You know, another another military connection here. He struggled to make a literary breakthrough. Um, let's see, the Lost Generation and Hemingway is attributed to him. Zelda's, you know, obviously uh, had an illness and is the character in the book, you know, the Great Gatsby, if you will, is based upon his real life kind of character without the unfortunate schizophrenia that his wife had. Um, let's see. How was it here that um, Fitzgerald achieved sobriety over a year before his death, and Graham, described their last year together as one of the happiest times of their relationship. On the night of December 20th, 1940, Fitzgerald and Graham attended the premiere of this thing called Love. As the couple hit the theater, a sober Fitzgerald experienced a dizzy spell and had difficulty walking to his vehicle. Watched by onlookers, he remarked in a strained voice to Graham, "I suppose people will think I'm drunk." So the next day, lying on his back, and he gasped and lapsed into unconsciousness. After failed attempts to revive him, Graham ran to fetch Harry Culver, the building manager, and he's afraid that Fitzgerald was died, and he died of coronary arteriosclerosis at the age of 44. Okay, and so there's the tragic sophomore-ish death of F. Scott Fitzgerald. Now we all know the Great Gatsby set in New York, and there's actually a hotel in New York where one of the famous scenes occurs in the book. It's called the Plaza Hotel, and so there's some Plaza Hotel items. Belushi's career kind of took off when he joined Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live is filmed where? New York. And so you get the double connection there. Now, poor old Belushi, he also died at a pretty young age in West Hollywood from a speedball and some nice gettings together there. He was in I think he did voiceover work for a movie Tarzan, Shame of the Jungle. And that was one of Belushi's works, interestingly enough. I think there's a jungle connection here somewhere. So if you look at page 96, it's pretty obvious that we're looking at John Belushi in the picture of the sophomore Jinx. I mean, we have a fairly rotund fella, you know, wearing a sweater and he's got some leaves, larkspur leaves, and he's carrying a sheep thing. I don't know. Oh, or is that the thing you pull somebody off the stage with? I'm not sure what that is, but anyway. Some more information is also in the image on page 97, and it's a treasure trove. You know, the stop sign, which could have been stolen, was invented by Harold Harry Jackson. Oh, that's right. Chicago Jackson Street is actually where you had to go to Jackson Street. Got you directly to where the treasure was in Chicago. And here we have in the image the guy, a stop sign which was invented by Harold Harry Jackson. Well, the sign wasn't invented in Chicago. Unfortunately, it's invented in Detroit in 1914. But still, the irony of it being in Jackson is just not lost on me whatsoever. Below the stop sign, it appears to be a frisbee, a flying disc, a frisbee. It's basically something that was invented by Walter Frederick Morrison and his future wife, Lucille, by the way. Lucille, as in, how many times are we going to mention Lucy in the book, The Secret? I found another one. It's Lucille Morrison. Well, anyway, they're a couple. They were happy. They were out in Los Angeles at the beach, and they were tossing a Tupperware lid. Oh, did we just not earlier have a picture of a bowl of popcorn in the page before without a lid on it? Well, I guess now in the sophomore Jinx, we discovered where the lid off of that Tupperware jar went. That Tupperware bowl lid went out to the Morrisons, and they were flinging it back and forth. Uh, so he designed a sketch of a disc that he called the Whirlo Way, and he named it after a famous racehorse. Okay. So anyway, Warren. So they began producing these flying discs, if you will, and eventually, I think their company became the international, or the Whammo company eventually bought Frisbee. But anyway, the point here is that it was invented in California, Los Angeles, at a beach. Oh, let's see. What else do we have? What else do we have? We have a yo-yo. Oh, hanging down from the top, we have a hanging element, a yo-yo. And I don't know if that's Yo-Yo Ma, the famous conductor, or just a regular old yo-yo. But the history of the yo-yo dates itself, obviously back to China. But maybe more interestingly is in 1928, Pedro Flores, a Filipino immigrant to the United States, opened the yo-yo manufacturing company in Santa Barbara, California. So the yo-yo maybe takes us out to Santa Barbara, and the Greek records from the period describe toys made out of wood, metal, and terracotta. So a Greek vase painting from 440 BC shows a boy playing with a yo-yo. Yeah, you might want to look at that. A pretty interesting painting of a vase. And so the history of the yo-yo gets you some of that Greek stuff, gets you in that Greek deal, and then you can look at this other Donald Duncan, who kind of ran Duncan Toy Company in Luck, Wisconsin, as also another person that was instrumental in the yo-yo. Now, let's see the college pizza. Now, when I was in college, you could get your pizza delivered in a pizza box, and it's kind of nice that you can get your pizza in a box, and that's because Thomas Stephen Monahan, who was born in 1937, founded Domino's Pizza in 1960. And he owned the Detroit Tigers, by the way, but that happened after the book was printed. But he did buy them in '83, so it wasn't. He might have been in the news trying to purchase them before. So his father died when he was 4 years old. The mothers had difficulty raising him, and so Monahan and his younger brother ended up in an orphanage until '49. The orphanage, the St. Joseph Home for Children in Jackson, Michigan. Oh, we got another mention of Jackson in relationship to Chicago. Oh, in the same sophomore Jinx puzzle. Interesting. Well, anyway, he eventually was brought back home, and he graduated from high school, and then he enlisted in the Marines. But he didn't mean to do it, and so he got a dishonorable discharge, or no, he got an honorable discharge 3 years later. He had meant to join the army, by the way. So he returned to Ann Arbor, Michigan in '59, and he went to the University of Michigan. There's several people that go to the University of Michigan in this book, The Secret, in the back of the book. And I don't know if there's a reason for that, or if it's I don't know, coincidence. But the reason I bring this all up is because the reason today that your pizza is delivered in a cardboard box is because the founder of Domino's originally delivered his pizzas that way. And if you look at the image, you have an image of a pizza in a box on the table. And you thought all this stuff in these backgrounds just didn't really kind of mean anything. But when you start actually look at them, you can figure out that there's a lot to these images. So there's a bicycle in the background here. It looks like the spoke tires spinning around. And there's so much that can be looked at in terms of the bicycle and what it means. The invention of the bicycle way, way, way predates anything. But I can think of the Schwinn Company and Triumph and a couple of other manufacturers of bicycles, but there's probably a reason that bicycle is in there. The rake is another interesting item that's in the image there. If you look at the history of the rake, it goes back to China, even further back than that. And it's really kind of hard to figure out why they had to picture this rake in here. The only thing I can think of is the first person to hold a patent on that style of rake was a guy by the name of Brown, and his first name was Edmund, by the way. Another Edmund, Edmund Brown. And then there's also in the background there's a skull, and I've not found right what the reason for that. And then there's some chips that are kind of in a box. It says chips on the top of it, and I don't know if those are poker chips or what that is. The boy holding the beer stein is got a U on his front of his shirt, and another U. And now those could be horseshoes instead of just being used. There might be a little more to that. So the beer keg. I was trying to figure out why the beer keg was in here, but again, I think Joe Roth is credited as being the person who invented the modern beer keg. The beer keg manufacturer might be Kaiser Aluminum, which we're going to learn about later. And so if that goes back to the Kaiser, that could be the reason. There's a hose. I don't know if it's a pantyhose because I can't see the panty part, but there's a hose laying on the top, and the nylon. If you want to call that a nylon or a nylon sock or a women's hosiery or pantyhose, the Wallace Hume Carruthers, Julian Hill, and other researchers at DuPont. We've already talked about DuPont Company. Were the people that invented the nylon stocking. And so, we've already talked about where DuPont is from. So the other boat shoes in the bottom part of this image, we have some boat shoes. And so the boat shoe, otherwise known as a Sperry topsider, is a canvas and leather with a non-marking surface. A siping pattern is cut into the soles to provide grip on a wet deck. The leather construction is designed to repel water. Modern boat shoes were invented in 1935 by Paul A. Sperry from Connecticut after noticing his dog's ability to run easily over ice without slipping. So using a knife, he cut sipes into the shoes soles, inspiring a shoe perfect for boating, and he called them the Sperry topsider. The reason I think I'm pretty confident these are Sperry topsiders is that it appears that the person wearing them does not have any socks on, and typically the fad at the time was to wear your boat shoes with no socks on them, wearing no socks. Um, so the other thing mentioned here is a vintage raccoon uh, uh, coat, and that may have to do with that image that has that thing that looks like a raccoon in it. And I don't know where we put that based upon that information, but considering that it mentions boat night over here in the history, I would imagine that I'm doubly confirmed on the boat shoes. The megaphone here just shows that the actor did some voice work, and that he did that voice work for that movie Tarzan: Shame of the Jungle. He provided the voice in that series. So the Perard drawing appears to be like it's a window. In other words, there's a bottom sill and a top sill to it. Um, and then there's a bottle of, I don't know if that's a Bartles and James wine cooler bottle that's sitting there on the pizza. And then there's a stereo set up there. And you could go Panasonic, Sony, JVC, a whole bunch of different ways with that particular item over there. So I think that pretty much wraps up how all these indications of Chicago are in this image, and all these people, and all these other different references to other ways of getting at the puzzle. But this is the second time that they've introduced a Jackson character on top of a number of other people that hail or have a connection to Chicago. And so I'm pretty confident that my assessment of that 222 Jackson is actually the way to solve that puzzle, because it's confirmed in the back of the book. Belushi's story also has to do with the Cherokee Studios and Machine and stage diving, because part of Belushi's history goes out to California, where he was involved in promoting a band, and in fact he died in West Hollywood. And I think that West Hollywood, I think if there's not one of these buried underneath one of the letters of the Hollywood sign, I'll be shocked. I'm just starting to feel that considering the fact that we talked about a guy that was belonged to the son of a magnate in the sign business, just like one story before this one, and now I'm thinking, the guy died in Hollywood, and which letter? So the question is, which letter under the Hollywood sign is there one of the casts buried? Which letter? And I think when we get later on, we'll find there's an actress that actually took a stage dive off of one of the letters, and that she might be mentioned in this book. But I might be wrong. So anyway, I appreciate your time and attention today. I'm going to run out and get me something to eat for supper. My voice is about ready to give out on doing the secret puzzles, so this will probably be the last one for today. I mean, this is my complaint to the community. I'm a little disappointed that I don't have more people, checking out these videos on the secret. Because I have really put a lot of effort into this research. I'm just not going through the book for the first time. I actually went through the book once, made notes on it, and pulling back up all of the pages that I bookmarked for each of the stories and tried to bring them to life for you, so you can live the experience of the 1980s and know that you're looking at the sophomore Jinx, and you're looking at John Belushi in this picture. Because many of you won't even have a reference to who this individual was. And you just take for granted all these things that are in the images, the stereo, there's some, I think there's some underwear or a horse's head or something hanging off of that stereo, and I haven't figured out what it is yet. So I didn't talk about it. But there's just so much more that's in each of these images. There's a hinge on that refrigerator, that apartment-sized refrigerator. The mainly thing that they're showing there is the hinge. They're showing like a flip over calendar in this thing. There's got to be meanings to all these different items. And so, well, anyway, I appreciate your time today. I hope everybody has a good rest of their day, and we'll check in later. Good day.